Welcome back to Boring History for Sleep. I hope you've dimmed the lights, made yourself comfortable, and maybe turned on a fan or a little white noise for that soothing background hum. As always, we invite you to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy drifting off with us. If you feel inclined, let us know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is right now for you. It's always fascinating to see our sleepy community spread across the globe. Now, close your eyes if you like. Tonight you're not in your bed. You wake up in the wind-swept grasslands of Central Asia, under the broad felt roof of a Mongol ger, surrounded by the most efficient military machine of the medieval world. You've somehow joined a Mongol army camp. Unfortunately for you, you won't last a full day. Let's see why. You wake slowly, not because you feel well-rested, but because the air inside the tent is thick and smoky, pressing gently on your eyelids. At first, you think it might still be night, because only a weak, silvery glow leaks in from above. But no, it's dawn, just filtered through layers of stitched felt, horsehair, and the faint haze of yesterday's fire. Welcome to your new bedchamber, a Mongol ger. It is round, it is sturdy, and it smells like a barn. Had an enthusiastic conversation with a barbecue pit. The floor beneath you is uncompromising. It's nothing but packed earth, flattened by boots and hooves and time. Someone has laid a woven mat under your side, but the mat has all the padding power of a paper towel. Your hip bones complain, your back suggests mutiny. Somewhere nearby, a man snores with a noise like a horse trying to clear its throat. You might wish for a pillow, but in this world, a bundle of spare clothes counts as luxury bedding. The smoke that hangs in the air comes from last night's fire, when dried dung smoldered in the central hearth. It clings to the felt walls and the wool coats piled in a corner. It clings to you, too. We're now part smoke, part person. A light cough escapes you before you can stop it. Someone across the tent opens one eye and frowns as though to say, "Yes, it's smoky." Welcome to every morning of our lives. You close your mouth and resolve to endure it in silence. The chill, however, is harder to ignore. Even with the ger's felt covering, the night air seeps in. Cold fingers of wind probe the seams where the walls meet the ground. Your breath fogs faintly as you sit up. The Dila-long, thick coat waits at your side. You pick it up, half expecting it to feel like a blanket. It doesn't. It is heavy, stiff, and smells unmistakably of mutton fat. This is on purpose. The grease makes it more weatherproof. Your nose wrinkles, but your skin thanks you once you put it on. Mongol fashion may not win style points in Milan, but it does keep you from freezing to death. Around you, the camp is waking. Children whimper, mothers shush them, and men clear their throats with alarming vigor. Leather boots slap against the ground as people move outside. A kettle clanks against iron, promising something hot, though don't imagine coffee. The Mongols didn't do coffee. The closest you'll get to a caffeine jolt is a bowl of fizzy, sour mare's milk, but that revelation comes later. For now, you're adjusting to the fact that privacy here is a theoretical concept. The ger is a shared space. You woke up among strangers, and every glance reminds you that you're not part of the family. Still, there's something oddly comforting in the orderliness. The ger itself is practical genius. Wooden poles arch overhead, meeting at the smoke hole where pale light drifts down. Everything inside has a place. Saddles stacked neatly, bows hung out of reach of curious children, pots lined up along the wall. Life here is compact, efficient. Nothing wasted, nothing extra. If Marie Kondo had lived on the steppe, she would have found her people. You rub your eyes and step outside. Immediately the vastness hits you. The grasslands stretch to the horizon in every direction, rippling like a sea under the cold dawn wind. The camp is already alive. Smoke rises from other gers, horses snort and stamp their hooves, and dogs trot between tents with the air of creatures who know they own the place. You squint at the sky, wide and endless. Out here, there are no fences, no streets, no comfortable walls, just sky above and grass below. You are very small in comparison, and the Mongols know it. That's why they built their world to move with them, never tied to one spot for too long. The cold air sharpens your hunger, your stomach complains loudly, reminding you that last night's dinner was little more than a strip of chewy meat. You glance toward the central fire, where a pot already bubbles. A man stirs it with a carved wooden spoon, humming tunelessly. The smell is faint, sour, and milky. Not quite breakfast as you know it, more like breakfast's eccentric cousin. But we'll come to that soon. For now, remember this moment, your first awakening in the camp. Your body is stiff, your throat dry, and your hair smells like smoke and livestock. Yet you're alive, clothed, and standing under the endless steppe sky. For the Mongols, that is a fine start to any day. And besides, there's no time to linger. The others are already moving on to the next order of business. Breakfast awaits, though you may wish it didn't. You shuffle toward the fire with the hopeful optimism of someone who believes. Against all evidence that a hot breakfast might rescue the morning, in your imagination, a loaf of bread waits somewhere, perhaps an egg sizzling in a pan, or if the universe is kind of steaming mug of coffee. Reality, however, presents you with a wooden bowl filled with a cloudy pale liquid that fizzes faintly like it has secrets. Congratulations, you are about to meet kumi, the beverage of choice on the Mongol steppe. You take a cautious sniff. It smells sour, a little grassy, and strangely sharp, like milk and beer had an argument, and neither quite won. Around you, men gulp it down in generous swigs, smacking their lips with satisfaction. A child giggles as the drink leaves a white streak on his upper lip. They're all fine, thriving even. You brace yourself and lift the bowl. The taste is complicated. Sourness arrives first, curling your tongue, followed by a faint fizz that tingles unpleasantly at the back of your throat. There is an aftertaste that suggests someone once whispered "horse" directly into the drink before handing it to you. And yet it's not entirely terrible. Once you get over the surprise, it's oddly refreshing, a drink meant to wake you up in a world without cappuccinos. The Mongols drink kume not just for refreshment but for strength, believing it cleanses the body and sharpens the spirit. You, meanwhile, focus on swallowing without grimacing. But kume is only half the ordeal. Into your hand someone presses a slab of meat. Not the tender, roasted kind you know from home, but a piece of dried mutton that has the texture of old leather left out in the sun. You chew and chew. The meat does not yield easily. Every bite feels like an arm workout. It tastes of smoke, salt, and time itself. Around you, men tear at their portions like it's nothing, their jaws trained for this since childhood. You, however, feel your molars filing a formal complaint. The camp does not pause to savor. Breakfast here is not about delight but fuel. Calories matter, not presentation. The kumi provides liquid energy and a faint buzz of alcohol. The meat fills your stomach with protein dense enough to power a horse ride across the steppe. There are no spices, no sweet touches, no comforting bowls of porridge. You eat because the day ahead will not wait for you. As you notice the rhythm of camp life around you. Horses whinny impatiently, waiting for their morning care. Children tug on sleeves, their cheeks flushed red from the wind. A woman pours kumi into a skin bag for the road, while another man scrapes the last bits of fat from a pot and licks the spoon with satisfaction. Food is survival, but it is also community. Sharing the same drink, the same stew, binds everyone here together. You might not enjoy the flavors, but refusing them would separate you from the group. And out here, being separate is dangerous. You finish the last of your bowl, feeling the sourness linger in your chest. There's a faint warmth, almost like courage, though it may just be mild intoxication. Either way, you're expected to keep moving. No one lingers over breakfast. The horses are calling, and they're the true center of life here. You glance longingly at your empty bowl, wishing it contained orange juice, maybe toast, perhaps even jam. Instead, it offered you the gift of survival on the steppe, fermented milk and chewy meat. Not pleasant, not Instagram-worthy, but effective. And now, with your stomach faintly unsettled and your jaws sore from chewing, you're pointed toward the next necessity of camp life, tending to the horses. After all, in the Mongol world, breakfast is just the prelude. The real work begins the moment you step into the herd.
You step outside into the pale light of morning, still feeling the odd fizz of kumis lingering on your tongue. Before you can even blink the sleep fully from your eyes, the sound of the herd takes over, an ocean of hooves thudding against the earth, tails swishing, nostrils flaring. Horses, more horses than you've likely seen in your life. To the Mongols, these creatures are not pets, nor mere transport. They are the very bloodstream of the camp. Without them, the army would collapse. Without them, you will collapse too. At first, they look identical, sturdy, short-legged, shaggy-coated beasts closer to ponies than the sleek cavalry horses of a Hollywood film. But as you watch, you see the differences, the proud arch of one's neck, the scar down another's flank, the way some stand calmly while others dance and snort, barely restrained by rope. Each soldier has several, sometimes 5 or more, and they rotate them constantly, keeping them fresh for war and travel. Horses here are the true soldiers. The men are simply their riders. You're handed a rope and pointed toward one particular animal, whose rolling eyes suggest he's not thrilled about meeting you. You approach cautiously, recalling every horse-related movie you've ever seen. You murmur something soothing, which in this case is just a string of nervous syllables. The horse flicks an ear toward you, unimpressed. When you reach for the rope, he jerks his head up and sidesteps, hooves stamping the earth with an audible thud. Somewhere behind you, a child, yes, a child, grabs 2 horses by their manes and leads them calmly away. You sigh. You are being shown up by a 10-year-old. The tasks begin with water. You trail after the others toward a shallow stream, buckets in hand, only to find that Mongol horses don't line up politely like schoolchildren. They crowd in, splashing, lowering their muzzles to drink noisily, jostling you until your boots are soaked. One horse sneezes a spray of half-drunk water across your face. The boy who manages 3 at once looks at you again, grinning. You're damp, cold, and humbled, but at least hydrated by proxy. Next comes grooming, though grooming here is not the delicate brushing of glossy manes. It's more like practical maintenance. A rough bristled brush is shoved into your hand, and you're expected to scrub mud, sweat, and burrs from a coat so thick it feels like carpet. The horse shifts under your touch, tolerating you, though not enthusiastically. Occasionally, he flicks his tail hard enough to slap your shoulder like a wet towel. You tell yourself it's affectionate, though you know better. Then the hooves. A soldier demonstrates by deftly lifting one leg, inspecting the sole for stones or cracks. You crouch, grab awkwardly at the fetlock, and the horse simply refuses, planting his hoof firmly into the earth. You tug harder, and he responds by leaning just enough weight on you to nearly topple you into the mud. Your arms strain, your back aches, and you wonder how much more respect you could lose in one morning. The answer? Plenty. Despite the embarrassment, there's something mesmerizing about it all. The sounds of the herd create a rhythm, the crunch of hooves on dry grass, the hiss of breath through flared nostrils, the occasional shrill whinny. The smell is overwhelming, a pungent mix of sweat, manure, and leather. Yet beneath the discomfort, there's a pulse of vitality. These animals are built for endurance, for the endless distances of the steppe. Watching them, you begin to see how entire armies could flow across continents, sustained by this living tide. By the time your assigned horse is watered, brushed, and checked, your arms feel like lead. The Mongols, however, move on briskly, already tightening saddles, adjusting reins, preparing for the day's drills. To them, this is routine. To you, it's a marathon disguised as chores. You try to keep pace, fumbling with knots and straps, only to have a soldier wordlessly retie them in half the time. It's clear you are not leading this horse's world. You are just a clumsy guest within it. Still, you manage to stay upright, rope in hand, horse beside you, at least until the next command arrives. Saddles are checked, bows are distributed, and suddenly the morning quiet shifts into preparation for training. The smell of sweat on your palms mixes with the faint sting of blisters forming. You glance at your neighbors, who move with effortless skill, bows already strung. The horses snort, stamping eagerly, as if they too know what comes next. Your arms ache, Your pride aches worse, but the real challenge is only now unfolding. It's time to learn what makes this army terrifying, and that begins with the weapon every horse carries as faithfully as its rider, the bow.
You are led from the restless sea of horses toward a clearing, where the air hums with a new kind of tension. The soldiers around you are quiet but purposeful, each of them carrying the unmistakable tool of their dominance. The Mongol composite bow, smaller than the longbows you've seen in museums or fantasy films, but don't be fooled, it's also far deadlier. Built from layers of horn, sinew, and wood, bound together with glue so strong it could survive generations, this bow is a masterpiece of engineering. Short, curved, and deceptively plain-looking. It has enough draw weight to make your arms feel like wet noodles after only a few pulls. You're handed one of these marvels, and for a brief, fleeting second, you feel cool, like maybe you could pull off being a nomadic warrior. That moment vanishes as soon as you actually try to string it. The bow resists with a stubborn, spring-like energy, as though it's mocking your weak modern forearms. You pull, grunt, and wobble until finally, with the help of a patient soldier who does it in about 2 seconds, the bow is strung. You smile awkwardly as if you were just warming up. Nobody believes you. Then comes the real work. The soldier gestures. Pull the string back. Easy, you think. You grip, you draw, and instantly you realize that your upper body strength is not what you imagined. The bow creaks. Your arms shake. Your fingers burn. You make it halfway before your muscles stage a revolt. Meanwhile, beside you, a wiry teenager pulls his bow to full draw, holds it calmly, and releases with a sharp twang that sends an arrow hissing into a distant target. You can't even see the arrow fly, it's that fast. You glance at him. He shrugs like this is just Tuesday. Your own release is less inspiring. The string slaps against your wrist with a sting sharp enough to make your eyes water. Congratulations. You now have your first Mongol war injury, and it's a bruise shaped like a question mark. The arrow wobbles pitifully, landing several feet short of the target. Somewhere a goat bleats in derision. But the training continues. Draw, release. Draw, release. Over and over until your fingers ache, and the blisters begin to bloom along the pads of your fingertips. The bowstring bites into your skin with every shot, leaving angry red marks. The Mongols glance at your hands, amused but unsurprised. To them, calluses are badges of honor, evidence of survival. To you, they feel like the beginning of a medical complaint. You try to imitate their posture, the upright back, the steady breath, the smooth release. But your body insists on being awkward. Your elbows jut at odd angles, your stance wobbles. The bowstring catches your sleeve, smacks your forearm, leaves another stinging reminder. You mutter something about OSHA regulations, though of course no one here has heard of workplace safety. Yet little by little, you start to sense the rhythm. There's something hypnotic in the process. The creak of the bow bending, the sharp snap of the string, the faint whistle of an arrow cutting through air. It's not graceful, not yet, but it's mesmerizing. You're no marksman, but for a moment, you forget the pain and focus on the breath, the draw, the release. The arrow doesn't just leave your fingers. It takes with it a fraction of your frustration. Around you, the soldiers loose volleys in unison, their arrows raining down on targets with terrifying precision. You imagine hundreds of them on horseback, firing like this while moving at full speed. It's no wonder entire empires crumbled before this sound. A rainstorm of death orchestrated by people who probably started practicing before they could walk. The blisters grow, your arms ache, and the bow feels heavier with each attempt. Still, there's a strange pride in enduring it. Your shots improve slightly, not good, but less embarrassing. One arrow even grazes the edge of the target. You beam with satisfaction. The Mongol beside you glances, unimpressed, and casually lands 5 in the bullseye before you can even nock another arrow. You sigh, humbled again. The training session ends, not with applause, but with sore muscles and raw fingers. You unstring the bow, clumsy once more, and hand it back. Your arms feel as though you've been wrestling with stone. Your fingertips throb, your wrists sting, and you wonder how long it takes before blisters turn to calluses. The soldiers, of course, don't seem tired at all. They chat, adjust their gear, and glance toward the horses waiting nearby. For them, this is the warm-up. For you, it feels like a full-body workout disguised as humiliation. but there's no time to collapse in the grass. The sun climbs higher, the horses stamp impatiently, and the next stage of training looms. It's not enough to draw a bow on steady ground. Soon, you'll be asked to fire while galloping, balancing your bruised body atop a half-wild horse. Your arms are already shaking, your fingers raw, and yet the Mongol way insists that the lesson is just beginning. The horses are waiting, and whether you're ready or not, your blisters will soon have to learn the art of the saddle. When the sun beat down on the endless sea of grass that stretched out around him, Temujin wondered if it would be easier to die in battle or die of boredom. It was his first assignment as a guard, and he wasn't even sure he was doing it right. It had been a grueling day of training with the other recruits, learning how to ride, shoot, and fight on horseback. And now here he was, standing watch on the edge of camp with nothing but a heavy spear and the vast steppe horizon to look at. The experienced Mongol warriors who had accompanied them on their campaign weren't even there yet. He shifted uncomfortably on his horse, trying to look alert. His armor was itchy, and his helmet made him sweat. In the distance, he could hear the other recruits making camp, and he felt a twinge of longing for the camaraderie, for the simple distraction of working together on something. He had no idea how long he'd been standing there. Time seemed to have stopped. Then a small brown rabbit hopped past, its nose twitching. Temujin startled, his hand instinctively reaching for the bough that wasn't there. But he quickly raised his spear instead, trying to remember what one of the veteran soldiers had told him about tracking rabbits. He looked around, embarrassed, realizing he'd almost just attacked a rabbit with a spear meant for charging into battle. The rabbit disappeared over a rise in the land, and Temujin sighed, slumping a little. Being a guard wasn't all that it was cracked up to be. Maybe he'd get an actual enemy to fight soon, someone who wouldn't hop away when he tried to stab them. Hours passed. The sky turned from blue to purple, and the annoying sound of insects filled his ears. Then he heard a noise that made him jump, his heart pounding in his chest. Was it an enemy? Had they come so quickly? Had he not been able to hear them? As the darkness deepened, every shadow became a threat. Paranoia twisted in his gut. The tall grasses swayed in the wind, and each movement sent a jolt of fear through him. He strained to listen for any sound that might tell him what was out there. But then another sound cut through the night, a familiar small animal rustling in the grass. A rabbit again. Temujin let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Just a rabbit. He settled back slightly, feeling a mixture of irritation and relief. How could he have been scared of a rabbit? Yet again, it was his first night on guard duty, and perhaps he was still getting used to the responsibilities. The rest of his shift passed without incident. The moon climbed higher in the sky, and the cold night air made him shiver. By the time the other soldiers came to relieve him, he was exhausted, his legs stiff from hours of standing. "You all right there, Temujin?" one of the veterans asked, noticing the dark circles under his eyes. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Temujin managed a weak smile. "It's nothing, Toril. Just a long day." Toril nodded understandingly. "Being a guard is more than just fighting, you know," he said, his voice low. "It's about endurance. You have to prove you can stay upright when everything in you wants to collapse." Temujin looked out at the endless darkness that surrounded them. He thought about the hours he'd spent frozen with fear, unsure of what was real and what was imagined. He thought about the times his body had screamed at him to run, to hide, and how he'd resisted the urge, and then he knew what Toril meant. Being a guard wasn't just about facing external threats. It was also about facing the weakness within himself, the desire to give up, to succumb to the overwhelming feeling of loneliness and fear. And he had made it through the night, hadn't he? The sun rose the next morning, painting the sky in hues of pink and orange. Temujin watched as the other soldiers went about their daily routines, their faces relaxed and happy in the morning light. He felt a sense of pride knowing that he, too, was a part of this group, that he'd faced his fears and survived the night. He knew that the next time he was on guard duty, the loneliness and fear would be waiting for him again. But now, he was ready. Morning greets you not with birdsong or the gentle aroma of coffee, but with a horn blast that sounds like a brass instrument being strangled. You groan, though the groan doesn't quite make it out of your throat. Your ribs are too sore from yesterday. Every muscle feels like it was replaced overnight with wooden planks. You're not entirely sure if you slept on the ground, or if the ground slept on you. Regardless, the sun has risen, and the Mongol army doesn't particularly care about your personal comfort level. You shuffle toward the training ground, where men and boys already move with the loose energy of people who've been awake for hours. Some are mounted, circling the camp at a gallop, loosing arrows at invisible enemies. Others stretch in ways that make your joints ache just to watch. You rub your shoulders, muttering something about ergonomic mattresses and yoga classes, and then it's your turn. The day begins with more archery, of course. Your bow hand is still raw from yesterday, but you try not to show it. The Mongols are not interested in excuses. They're interested in whether you can pull your weight. You raise the bow, fingers trembling, and after a few clumsy shots, your body starts to betray you. The blisters deepen, the skin reddens, and your forearms scream in protest. Somewhere in the middle of this ordeal, you stop aiming at targets altogether and start aiming simply to survive each draw. But archery is only the opening act. Next comes horseback drills. You are lifted onto a horse because mounting implies a level of grace you do not possess, set loose to practice balancing while turning in the saddle. It feels like trying to stand on a greased barrel as it rolls downhill. Your horse snorts, clearly unimpressed with your performance, and continues at a trot that rattles your teeth. Meanwhile, children half your size zip past at full gallop, turning to fire arrows behind them without even looking where they're going. You cling on with the enthusiasm of a man who does not want to meet the earth face first. And then there's wrestling. You didn't sign up for wrestling, but apparently the Mongols consider it a core part of military conditioning. You're paired with a wiry soldier who smiles politely, then proceeds to fold you into shapes that most chiropractors would label inadvisable. You flop onto the grass with a wheeze, feeling as though your bones have been rattled loose. The soldier helps you up, dusts you off, and gestures to try again. You laugh weakly as if to say, "Ha, yes, good joke," but he's not joking. By midday, your body has staged a full rebellion. Your thighs are leaden, your back aches, your hands are swollen, and even your eyelashes feel tired. You've reached a level of fatigue you didn't think was possible, the kind where even breathing seems like a chore. Yet somehow the training continues. The Mongols move with relentless rhythm. Rest. Drill again. They don't stop until their bodies are tuned instruments, precise and dependable. You, meanwhile, feel like a kazoo in an orchestra, and still there's something oddly hypnotic about it. Between the aches and bruises, you notice moments of beauty. The way the boughs snap in near unison, the drumbeat of hooves across the steppe, the laughter of young recruits who treat exhaustion as a friend, not an enemy. There's camaraderie in the hardship, a shared understanding that this suffering is the glue of their discipline. When the sun finally dips toward the horizon, you collapse near the campfire, every limb protesting as you lower yourself onto the ground. The Mongols chat easily, eat heartily, and prepare for tomorrow without complaint. You sit there blinking, wondering how they do it. Your body hums with aches, but there's a strange sense of survival in that pain. You endured clumsily, gracelessly, but you endured. The night breeze cools the sweat on your skin, and for a moment, you think perhaps you'll live through this after all. But then a soldier reminds you, tomorrow's training involves weapons, practice with sabers. You glance at your trembling hands and wonder if your bones will even be intact enough to hold one. And so the cycle continues. Today was hard, tomorrow will be harder, and your body will keep protesting louder each day. Still, you can't shake the sense that in their world, constant breaking down and rebuilding is the only way to become unbreakable. By the time the sun slides toward its lazy afternoon perch, your body is an orchestra of aches. Every muscle hums its own off-key complaint, and your stomach joins in with a growl so loud that even the horses glance at you in mild judgment. Thankfully, salvation arrives not in the form of rest, but in the form of food. It's time for the second meal of the day, though meal might be overselling it. Think of it less as a feast and more as a nutritional intervention. You're led toward a low fire where iron pots bubble with suspicious enthusiasm. The air smells of boiled meat, smoke, and something faintly sour like yogurt that's been through a difficult year. A soldier ladles the stew into a wooden bowl and hands it to you. The texture is thick but lumpy, chunks of mutton swimming in a broth that tastes equal parts salty, fatty, and vaguely barnyard. It's hearty fuel, no doubt, but your modern taste buds protest. You chew slowly, reminding yourself that calories are survival, even when the flavor profile screams surprise goat. Next comes the dairy. Bowls of fermented mare's milk circulate, frothy and sour on the tongue. The Mongols sip it like lemonade on a summer day, smacking their lips in appreciation. You, however, hesitate. The smell alone could strip wallpaper. Still refusing would be rude, so you take a cautious gulp. The liquid fizzes oddly as it slides down your throat, sour, sharp, and unexpectedly warming. Your stomach gurgles in confusion, unsure whether to thank you or stage a rebellion. There's also dried curd, little chunks of hardened cheese so dense you wonder if they actually edible or just improvised sling ammunition. No on a piece, nearly cracking a molar, and realize this is not food meant to delight. It's food meant to last. Portable, durable, unyielding, much like the people themselves. You look around, watching how the soldiers tuck into their bowls without hesitation, and you feel a twinge of humility. They eat not for pleasure, but for endurance, and it shows in the way they treat every scrap as essential. As you force down another mouthful, you notice the camaraderie that gathers around the pot. The food is simple, but the act of sharing it binds the camp together. Jokes are traded, stories told, and laughter bubbles up despite the monotony of the diet. You don't understand the words, but you understand the feeling. Food isn't just sustenance, here it's glue. And in its own way, that glue is stronger than the sour aftertaste clinging stubbornly to your tongue. By the time your bowl is empty, your stomach feels heavier, but not necessarily happier. You wipe your mouth, grateful for the warmth the meal provides, even if the flavors are destined to haunt you. The Mongols, invigorated, move easily back to their tasks. You, on the other hand, sit there, blinking, trying to decide if you're nourished or poisoned. Either way, you're full, and in this world, that's all that matters. Soon the sun begins to tilt lower, shadows lengthen, and the camp shifts into its evening rhythm. Your stomach, still buzzing from the fermented milk, reminds you that the day isn't over. There's guard duty drills and the endless watchfulness of life on the steppe, and as the laughter around the fire fades into the quiet murmur of preparation, you realize that survival here is less about what you eat and more about how you carry the weight of it both in your belly and in your bones. Because the second meal is never the end, which is fuel for whatever the night demands next. I just finished eating a whole goat in a Mongol army camp. It was an incredible experience, and now I'm thirsty, really thirsty. Welcome to my channel. Today we are spending a day in the life of a Mongol warrior. After a hard day's march, we arrived at camp late and hungry. We were welcomed by our host, Batbayar, who immediately got to work preparing food for us. As a member of the Olk Mongol tribe who lives a semi-nomadic lifestyle, she is used to living out on the open range with her husband and children, moving from place to place and surviving off the land. She taught us how to find food and water in the wilderness, how to build a shelter from natural materials, and how to start a fire without matches or lighter fluid. Most importantly, she taught us how to be self-sufficient and how to survive in the great outdoors. When I woke up this morning, my throat was so dry I could have swallowed a horse. Now, after finishing my breakfast of dried horse meat, cheese, and bread, I am parched. I asked Batbayar where I could get some water, and she directed me to a nearby muddy stream. There are no restrooms here. The horses drink from this stream too. Even the dogs are getting a drink from this stream. It doesn't look very clean, but it is water. In today's world, we are spoiled when it comes to access to clean, safe drinking water. But back then, people didn't have the same luxury. For the Mongols, water was a precious commodity, something that had to be conserved and carefully rationed. In the army camp, there was no such thing as bottled water or water delivered through pipes from a municipal supply. Instead, the soldiers had to rely on natural sources of water, such as rivers, lakes, and streams. This meant that the quality of the water could vary greatly depending on where they were camped and the time of year. As I dipped my head to take a drink, I couldn't help but notice the earthy, metallic taste that filled my mouth. It wasn't unpleasant, but it was definitely not refreshing either. I continued to drink until my thirst was quenched, and I felt a sense of satisfaction knowing that I had endured the challenge and come out on top. But there is another option. Kumis fermented mare's milk. It's a traditional Central Asian drink made from the milk of a mare that has recently given birth. The milk is left to ferment for several days, during which time it becomes sour, fizzy, and barn-like. It's not exactly what I would call refreshing, but it is what it is. I took a swig, and it was like nothing I had ever tasted before. It was sour, fizzy, and a little bit sweet. It reminded me of champagne, but if champagne went bad and was left to ferment for a few weeks, but it was definitely an acquired taste. Still, the Mongols have been drinking this stuff for centuries, so who am I to judge? I guess it's all about perspective. The Mongols, the taste of water didn't matter as much as the fact that it was water. They were willing to put up with a less than desirable flavor if it meant that they had something to drink. After all, water was essential for survival. For me, it was a different story. I had grown up in a time and place where I had access to clean, fresh water whenever I wanted. I was used to the crisp taste of mountain spring water that flowed from the taps in my house. When I went camping, I brought along a portable water filter that I used to purify any water that I came across. I had never had to worry about whether the water I was drinking was safe, or if I would get sick from it. So when I was faced with the choice of drinking the muddy stream water or the funky fermented mare's milk, I was hesitant to say the least. But as the old saying goes, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. If I wanted to be a Mongol warrior for a day, I had to do as they did, and so I took a deep breath and drank from the stream. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room. Does drinking muddy water make you dirty? Not at all. In fact, it's quite the opposite. By drinking the water, you are cleansing yourself of impurities and toxins that may be in your body. You are also showing respect for the natural world around you. After all, the water is not there for us to waste or pollute. It is a precious resource that we should cherish and use wisely. On the end, I learned that day that survival is more important than taste. And sometimes you have to endure a little bit of discomfort in order to stay alive. I may never forget the earthy, metallic taste of that water, but I will never forget the feeling of accomplishment that I had when I finished my first Mongol army camp. I may not be a true Mongol warrior, but I can at least say that I tried. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the vast Mongol steppe, a signal went up. A plume of thick white smoke rising from the largest tent in the encampment. A tent large enough to fit 1,000 men, a tent that belonged to the most powerful man in the world, Genghis Khan. For any Mongol male, young or old, belonging to any clan, the summons to the evening gathering at the great Khan's big black tent was a duty not to be ignored. It was a time to reaffirm one's loyalty, to show obedience, and most importantly, to listen. And they came. Hundreds of warriors from dozens of clans, their faces grim under the darkening sky. There was no feast tonight, no drinking or gambling. This was a war council, a time for talk, not revelry. Inside the tent, the air was thick with smoke, the smell of sweat and leather and the musk of men. Torches flared, casting flickering shadows on the faces of the assembled warriors. There were no chairs or thrones. The Mongols preferred to sit on the ground, cross-legged, wrapped in their heavy woolen robes. But the circle they formed was one of equals. At least it would be once the meeting started. Until then, each man was an individual, a distinct personality with his own ambitions and fears. But when the discussion began, they were part of something larger, a well-oiled machine, a deadly instrument of war. There was no wasted movement, no impulsive action. Everything was measured, calculated, deliberate. Genghis Khan, the undisputed leader, didn't speak much. He sat impassively, his face hidden in the shadows, listening intently. His eyes, though, were sharp, like a hawk's, missing nothing. Next to him sat his brother Temujin, his voice booming with power. Facing them were the four most trusted members of the Mongol war machine: Yabai, the master strategist, his right-hand man, Gelm, logistics expert Batui, the intelligence chief, and Hodula, the diplomat. These 5 men, along with the Khan, formed the core of the decision-making body, the group whose deliberations would decide the fate of nations. But everyone had a role. Even the youngest warrior could contribute to the discussion, and many did, their voices echoing in the large tent. The maps were drawn in dirt on big wooden tablets, showing the enemy positions, river crossings, troop movements. Each piece of information was a life or death matter. The council reviewed every aspect of the upcoming campaign, discussed potential problems, analyzed possible solutions. They talked about everything except killing. For the Mongols, even war had rules, a code of conduct established by their ancestors. Loot was not to be taken from a defeated foe, only what was given, or what was earned. Prisoners were to be treated humanely unless they revealed information about their own people. Women and children were never to be harmed unless they attacked first. Yes, there were exceptions, but those were made in the heat of battle. During the War Council, there was no room for cruelty. There was only strategy. For hours, the debate raged inside the tent, outside of which a fire crackled merrily, sending sparks spiraling into the night sky. Finally, when the moon replaced the sun and the stars blanketed the heavens, the council broke up. The men filed out of the tent in single file, their faces grim, their steps purposeful. One by one, they disappeared into the darkness, melting back into the vastness of the Mongol steppe. The smoke from the evening gathering still hung in the air, mingling with the scent of horses and leather and sweat. It was a lingering reminder of the night's events, a testament to the ceaseless churn of the Mongol war machine. The empire was still in formation, but its pieces were moving methodically across the board, disciplined, focused, deadly. The casual observer might have mistaken them for nomads, unorganized, unlettered barbarians, who cared for nothing more than drink and plunder. But those who looked closer, who delved deeper into the workings of this restless military machine, saw something quite different. A society built on logic and reason, on a common set of values and goals. The Mongol Empire was more than just a collection of warring tribes. It was an idea of conquest, of unity, of order. And it was all being carefully planned, step by step, in the smoke-filled tent of the Great Khan. You might think that after the smoke-filled council and the relentless training, the camp would finally wind down. Perhaps you imagine hammocks swaying gently, mugs of tea passed around, a bit of storytelling before bed. The Mongol army does not share this imagination. Instead, you rehanded a task, a chore so ordinary it feels almost insulting after a day of surviving bruises and sour milk. The first chore is fetching dung. Yes, dung. Horses produce it by the wagon load, and it's the camp's most reliable fuel. You're given a rough sack and pointed toward the grazing area. The air is sharp with the earthy tang of manure, and you quickly learn to distinguish between fresh and fire-ready. Your fingers twitch at the thought of touching it, but the Mongols scoop it up casually, like city dwellers, tossing logs into a fireplace. You imitate them awkwardly, trying not to breathe too deeply. It's humbling, though you remind yourself that without these piles of dried fuel, the camp would freeze. Next comes water hauling. The stream you drank from earlier has become your new errand destination. Wooden buckets dig into your palms as you stagger back and forth, sloshing half the contents onto your already filthy boots. The Mongols glide past, carrying double the load with ease, barely spilling a drop. Your arms throb, your shoulders ache, and yet somehow the buckets never seem to get lighter. Every trip back to camp feels longer than the last, as though the horizon is laughing at you. And then there's maintenance. Saddles need repairing, stirrups checked, bowstrings waxed. You're handed a piece of leather and a blunt tool, expected to stitch something that looks vaguely useful. The result of your handiwork resembles a craft project gone horribly wrong, but no one scolds you. A soldier quietly redoes your work in a few swift motions, his hands confident from years of repetition. You watch, embarrassed but oddly grateful, realizing that here, even chores are part of survival training. By the time the stars blaze overhead, you've scrubbed pots blackened with soot, shaken out bedding that's really just horse blankets, and tried to sweep dust out of a tent in the middle of a dusty plain, a task about as effective as drying laundry in a rainstorm. The chores are endless, looping back on themselves, each one necessary, each one exhausting. There is no final checkbox, no satisfying moment of done, only the knowledge that tomorrow the cycle begins again. Yet there's a rhythm in it too. The quiet clatter of work, the soft laughter shared over repetitive tasks. The way everyone's hands, even the most calloused, contribute to the same survival. You glance around and notice something humbling. No one is exempt. Even leaders stoop to gather dung or mend gear. The army runs not only on arrows and horses, but on constant invisible labor. As you collapse at last into the dirt, your hands raw and your clothes reeking of smoke and manure, you realize you've been initiated into the true heart of Mongol life. Not the thunder of battle, not the flash of steel, but the quiet, grinding work that makes thunder and steel possible. Tomorrow will bring more. Always more. And in that endless cycle, you begin to see how this army sustains itself. Not through glory, but through grit. And speaking of grit, you're fairly sure you still have some stuck in your teeth. The sun begins its slow dip toward the horizon, casting the steppe in shades of gold and rust. For a fleeting moment, you might imagine something almost cinematic, a heroic silhouette of riders framed against the blazing sky. The sort of thing you'd expect on a movie poster. But then you remember, you are one of those riders. And the romance of the moment dissolves the instant you swing back into the saddle. The horse greets your return with what feels like a sigh. Your legs, stiff from chores and bruised from training, protest the motion of settling into the saddle again. Within minutes, your thighs burn as if you've been sentenced to squat forever. The sway of the horse that once felt exhilarating now feels like a rolling torture device, a seesaw built solely to test your endurance. Each jolt reminds you that stirrups are not the forgiving platforms you once thought, but small, merciless slabs of wood and leather. The riders around you move with fluid ease, barely shifting as their horses trot into formation. They adjust reins with one hand, drink from skins with the other, even joke casually as the endless land stretches before them. You, meanwhile, are clutching the saddle horn as though it's the only thing preventing you from being catapulted into next week. Your horse, sensing your incompetence, occasionally veers off course just to test whether you're paying attention. Spoiler, you usually aren't. The air cools as the sun dips lower, brushing your face with a brisk wind scented of dry grass and faint horse musk. Your eyes water from the speed, though you try to pass it off as stoic resilience rather than sheer discomfort. The horizon seems to shift endlessly, always pulling you forward, always promising that the ride will last just a little longer. And it does, much longer. There's no romantic soundtrack here, no swelling orchestral score. Instead, you get the percussion of hooves drumming the earth, the occasional whinny, and the rhythmic slap of leather. You hear your own joints clicking faintly, like creaky door hinges, every time your horse jolts over uneven ground. Somewhere behind you, a younger rider laughs at your posture. You don't need to understand the words to know they mean rookie, yet there's also a strange beauty in it. The herd moves together, hundreds of riders silhouetted against a sky that seems endless, their shadows stretching long and thin across the grass. Dust rises in pale clouds, catching the dying light, turning the entire column into something spectral, as though you're part of a living painting. You might not look graceful, but you are part of the scene nonetheless. Your mind drifts in the rhythm. The ache of your muscles softens into a dull hum, almost meditative. You imagine what it must feel like to be truly skilled, able to fire an arrow mid-gallop, to guide the horse with the press of a knee, to ride for hours without soreness. For the Mongols, the horse is not a tool, but an extension of the body. For you, it's still an unpredictable, four-legged seatbelt test. But perhaps, with time, you'll learn, or at least you'll stop looking like a sack of potatoes tied to the saddle. As the sun finally sinks, the sky bleeding into purples and deep blues, the riders slow. You exhale, unsure whether to be relieved or anxious about what comes next. Another night of smoke, chores, and aching bones awaits, but for this brief twilight you are suspended in motion, drifting between exhaustion and wonder. The horizon swallows the last of the light, and with it, your fantasy of gallant horseback riding. Tomorrow you'll mount again reluctantly, of course. For now, you slide out of the saddle with all the grace of a collapsing scarecrow. It's grateful that the ground at least doesn't move beneath you. And as campfires spark to life in the darkening distance, you realize the night holds its own lessons.
Nice.
One's not of riding, but of rest, ritual, and resilience. When the column of riders finally drifts back toward camp, the first thing you notice is the smell. Smoke, not the clean, pine-scented kind you might associate with a holiday fireplace, but a thick, earthy haze of smoldering dung fires. It hangs low in the air, mingling with the scent of horse sweat, leather, and the faint temps of fermented mare's milk. This is your evening atmosphere and olfactory cocktail that no scented candle company would dare attempt. You follow the others toward the growing glow of fire circles, each one ringed by families, warriors, and wanderers. Sparks float upward into the night, like tiny golden insects, vanishing into the enormous dark sky. The grass underfoot crunches dry, and as you lower yourself near the warmth, the hard ground reminds you that comfort is a modern invention.
Ow.
Still, after a day of aching thighs and blistered palms, even hard-packed earth feels indulgent. The fires do more than warm you. They gather the people, draw them together into small constellations of light scattered across the steppe. Smoke curls in your eyes, making them sting and water. But the sting feels almost ceremonial, like initiation into the evening's fellowship. Around you, men and women lean in, sharing bowls, trading stories in quick, rolling Mongolic syllables. You can't follow the words, but the rhythm tells you what's happening. Teasing, boasting, debating, remembering. The language itself has a music that rides above the crackle of burning fuel, and then there is the actual music. Someone produces a horse-head fiddle, its carved neck glinting faintly in the firelight. The strings groan at first, then settle into a deep, resonant hum. The bow moves in long arcs, and the sound spreads outward, low and haunting. A sound that seems to echo the wind over the steppe. Voices rise to meet it, some raw and strong, others thin but insistent. The songs are not polished performances. They are lived things, part prayer, part lullaby, part memory of ancestors long gone. You don't understand the lyrics, but you don't need to. The tone alone carries you somewhere between melancholy and fierce pride. The smoke drifts into your clothes, your hair, your skin. Tomorrow, you'll still smell of it, no matter how far you ride. Tonight, though, it is part of the ritual of survival. Fire keeps predators back, keeps spirits appeased, and keeps boredom at bay. In the flicker of flames, faces glow and vanish, stories seem larger than life, and laughter bursts unexpectedly, sharp and bright. You sit quietly absorbing it all. The endless horizon has closed in for the night, replaced by this small, fiery world of song and shadow. It is not home, but for now, it feels like a kind of belonging. You don't sing, of course. Your accent would flatten the melody, but you hum softly, pretending your voice blends into the chorus. And now perhaps you, and perhaps that's kindness. As the fire dies down, people lean back, their silhouettes fading into the night. The smoke continues to coil, thinner now, drifting toward the stars. The music lingers even after the last notes fall silent, echoing in your ears as though the steppe itself is still humming. Acute. You close your eyes, lulled by the combination of warmth, fatigue, and that peculiar beauty only found in imperfection. And as embers glow like miniature suns at your feet, you realize that night in a Mongol camp is only about survival about weaving human company into the vast loneliness of the steppe. Tomorrow will bring more demands, more aches, more horses. But tonight, at least, there was fire, smoke, and song. And where there is song, there will soon be the softer matter of sleep, though not before the necessary battle with fleas. Hard ground, and the sheer challenge of finding rest in a tent that is never entirely still. Night on the steppe is never entirely silent. You notice this as soon as the music fades and the fire dies down to glowing embers. The chatter softens, replaced by the creak of leather, the snort of horses tied nearby, and the sigh of wind brushing through grass that never seems to stop moving. The sky is vast, heavy with stars, but the beauty does little to disguise the unease of lying down in a place that feels too open, too exposed. Your sleeping arrangements are not luxurious. A blanket, if you're lucky, and perhaps a thin felt mat to cushion you from the earth that has all the give of a stone tabletop. Around you, others curl together in furs, shoulder to shoulder, forming pockets of warmth in the cold air. Privacy is not a concept here. Comfort barely. You shift, trying to find a position where your hip bone doesn't dig into the ground, and immediately realize there is no such angle. The grass rustles under your ear, stiff and dry, and already you can feel the telltale prickle of something alive fleas, or perhaps just the paranoia of knowing fleas exist. Either way, congratulations. Your bed now comes with free inhabitants. The darkness doesn't mean rest, though. Mongol camp never truly sleeps. Someone is always on watch, pacing near the fires, scanning the distance for movement. You'd like to think the vastness of the steppe would warn you of danger hours before it arrives, but that same openness is unnerving. Any shadow on the horizon could be a rider, and by the time you saw them, they might already be close enough. So you drift toward, sleep with one ear open, straining for sounds that don't belong, the clink of a weapon, the sudden alarm of horses. Even when danger doesn't come, your body keeps you on edge. Every creak of your neighbor's bones, every cough in the dark, pulls you back toward waking. Horses shuffle and stamp, occasionally tugging at their tethers with a sharp snap. The wind shifts, bringing the lingering scent of smoke. Then suddenly, nothing but cold air that seeps into your blanket. You pull it tighter, though the blanket itself is scratchy, like trying to nap beneath a rug. There's also the small matter of hierarchy. You don't get to decide where you sleep. The warriors, the elders, the leaders, they all claim the most favorable spots near the fire, inside the better tents, away from drafts. You, meanwhile, find yourself nudged further out, where the wind slips in freely, where the stars look magnificent, but don't keep you warm. You roll over, look at the endless night above, and wonder if the constellations look any different here. They don't. They just feel colder. Still, the exhaustion of the day eventually forces your body to surrender. Your eyelids grow heavy, and sleep creeps in, not the deep, comfortable kind that modern mattresses promise, but a shallow, restless doze that leaves you hovering just below awareness. You wake at the crack of a twig, drift again when it turns out to be nothing. You dream lightly, dreams shaped by the day's noise, the pounding of hooves, the groan of bowstrings, the chorus of voices at the fire. Dreams stitched together from fatigue rather than imagination. And just when you've managed to slip into something resembling actual sleep, someone's elbow collides with your ribs as they roll over. You're awake again, glaring at the silhouette beside you. Sharing space in a Mongol camp means sharing discomforts too. If one person snores, everyone shares the concert. If one person kicks in their sleep, the unlucky neighbor takes the blow. This, then, is your night. A tug-of-war between exhaustion and unease, warmth and cold, drifting and waking. It's not restful, but it is survival. You'll rise tomorrow, bleary-eyed and stiff, as everyone else will, and the camp will stir back into its relentless rhythm, as though no one ever needed sleep in the first place. And tomorrow, of course, begins with the question of what wakes you, the crack of dawn or the stomach, always louder than the rooster you don't have. Hunger, as you'll discover, has no snooze button. Morning comes whether you're ready or not. The sun hasn't even cleared the horizon, and already the camp stirs with that brisk, no-nonsense rhythm you've come to dread. Yurts creak as coverings are pulled aside. Smoke rises again from rekindled fires. The sharp voices of commanders slice through the morning air like knives honed on impatience. You're stiff, you're sore, and you've only just remembered that your bedding doubled as a flea habitat, but none of that matters. The Mongol camp does not believe in excuses. Discipline here is not a matter of personal growth or self-discovery. It's survival, enforced with the kind of efficiency that makes boot camps look like yoga retreats. Orders are given, and you follow them immediately. Without hesitation, without the indulgence of asking why. If a commander tells you to ride, you ride. If he tells you to dismount, you hit the ground before the words are finished. If you stumble, someone behind you doesn't wait for you to recover. They simply ride past or ride over depending on their mood. Punishment isn't delivered with dramatic ceremony. It's quiet, matter-of-fact, and terrifying in its simplicity. A missed order might mean lashes, or worse, loss of rations. Imagine going without that morning ladle of Mare Zilk porringer, only consolation after a night of half-sleep, and you start to understand why nobody dares test the system. Hunger is a sharper motivator than any shouted command. What's striking is how little rebellion you see. The discipline is not resented. It is accepted, even respected. For the Mongol soldier, obedience is not humiliation. It's the spine that holds the army together, the invisible thread that keeps thousands moving as one body across a landscape too vast for hesitation. You, however, find it unnerving. The sharpness of the orders, the precision of the responses, it leaves no room for individuality. No space for the comforting illusion that you have control over your own day. Your own mistakes come quickly, rise a fraction too late when summoned. You tighten a strap incorrectly. You hesitate when mounting your horse, and the pause is noted by an officer whose eyes seem trained to catch the slightest error. The rebuke is sharp, public, and efficient. It burns your pride more than your skin, though both sting. And yet, oddly, you begin to understand. In an army that lives and dies by speed, by coordination, there is no tolerance for slowness. A single delay in the field could mean the difference between victory and slaughter. As the morning drills drag on, you feel yourself slipping into the rhythm despite yourself. You move when told, you shout when commanded, you obey without question. It's not natural, but it is strangely calming, like surrendering your will to the tide of a great river. You no longer have to decide what to do. The structure decides for you. Of course, that doesn't make it comfortable. Your muscles still ache, your patience still frays, and the bark of the commander still makes you jump like a startled rabbit. But in that jump, in that obedience, you glimpse why the Mongols could sweep across continents. They trained themselves to move as one, without compromise, without delay. The lesson is simple, if exhausting. There is no version of survival here without discipline. And as you stagger back toward camp for the next inevitable task, you realize that this lack of compromise extends into every corner of life meals. Chores, even the way you're expected to drink water, which, come to think of it, is where your next challenge begins. Understanding why water in the steppe is never quite the refreshing relief you imagine. Just as you begin to think the morning has settled into some rhythm chores, drills commands sharp enough to cut you hear the order ripple through camp. It's time to move, not later today, not after lunch. Now, the Mongol camp is not a village rooted in place. It's a living creature that sheds its skin and carries itself forward at a moment's notice. If you've grown fond of your smoky patch of ground, the fleas in your blanket, or the crooked spot where you've been tripping all week too bad, you're leaving it behind. It's a process is both chaotic and astonishingly efficient. It's those heavy felt-covered round tents seem immovable at first glance. Yet within minutes, you watch as whole families disassemble them. Peeling felt off like layers of an onion, folding lattice walls, collapsing roof poles. What looked like permanent homes reduce into neat stacks of wood and cloth that somehow get strapped to ox carts or camels. You try to help, of course, but your inexperience shows. That pole you think belongs on the right actually belongs on the left. That fold you thought was clever, it will unravel halfway through the journey. A child no older than 6 does the task with twice your speed and none of your clumsy fumbling. Packing isn't just about the tents. Every possession is sorted, bundled, and tied down with alarming speed. Saddles, pots, bows, skins of milk, spare harnesses, it all finds its place. You, meanwhile, are left staring at your blanket, wondering how even this small burden manages to resist being rolled into anything resembling a neat bundle. Your neighbors watch politely, the way one watches a goose attempt to climb a ladder. Eventually, someone takes pity on you, whips the blanket into a tidy roll with 2 flicks of the wrist, and tosses it onto a cart. The animals grumble at the commotion. Horses paw at the ground as saddles are tightened. Camels bellow complaints as they're loaded with bundles that look far too large for their backs. And the dogs weave through it all, barking as though supervising the effort. There's a rhythm here, an unspoken choreography where everyone knows their role. Except you. You will be more likely to be tripped by a rope or smacked in the face by a swinging pole than to contribute anything useful. And yet, in less than an hour, the camp that once sprawled across the plain like a small village is gone. Only faint circles of trampled grass and the smolder of abandoned fire pits remain. The wind sweeps through, as if erasing even those traces, carrying smoke and ash into the vast horizon. If you stumbled onto this field tomorrow, you might not even know hundreds of people had slept here the night before. It's a disappearing act, equal parts practical and unsettling. There's something humbling about watching an entire world collapse into bundles and march away. In your life, moving house is a project of weeks, a torment of boxes and tape and misplaced coffee mugs. Here, it's daily life. They carry not only their tools and food, but their very homes folded and lashed like luggage. The weight of civilization rests on carts, horses, and human shoulders. And because of that, there is no clinging sentimentality. Things are packed, tied, and moved without sighs of nostalgia. The world shifts, and you shift with it. As the carts creak forward and the horses fall into line, you can't help but glance back at the empty plain. Already it looks less like a home and more like just another patch of grass. The lesson is simple. Here, permanence is a luxury you cannot afford. Survival means movement, and movement means leaving comfort behind without hesitation. And so you ride again, the whole world packed into bundles that sway with every hoofbeat. Ahead lies another horizon, another patch of grass, another fire waiting to be lit. And, as you'll soon discover, another skirmish of survival, because on this step, moving the camp isn't just about going somewhere new. It's about being ready for whatever, or whoever, might come over the horizon next. As the caravan stretches across the steppe, you notice a shift in the air, not just the wind tugging at your cloak, but something more subtle. The riders grow quieter. And at the heart of it all, you catch your first clear glimpse of command. Not in the abstract sense of discipline or shouted orders, but embodied in the figure who moves with the calm certainty of someone born to be obeyed. The commander doesn't need to shout. His presence alone is enough. He rides slightly ahead, flanked by a handful of trusted men, his armor plain but polished, his bow strung and ready. His horse is steady, well-fed, more muscled than the others, and carries itself like it knows it belongs at the center. You, meanwhile, are still trying to keep your own horse from nibbling on the mane of the rider in front of you. The contrast is not flattering. Every gesture from the commander is efficient, deliberate. A raised hand brings the column to a halt. A flick of the wrist redirects a flank. He doesn't explain, he doesn't repeat, and he certainly doesn't wait. The orders ripple outward, translated instantly into movement by men who have trained for years to respond without hesitation. Watching it unfold feels less like observing an army and more like seeing a flock of starlings pivot in the sky, thousands moving as one, guided by signals invisible to outsiders. For a moment, you imagine yourself in that position, leading with confidence. Your voice carrying across the steppe, your horse steady beneath you as men bend to your command. It's a pleasant fantasy until reality reminds you that you can barely keep your saddle from sliding sideways. No one is following your lead. If anything, they're hoping you don't topple over and cause a chain reaction of chaos. Still, the glimpse is revealing. Command here isn't wrapped in pomp or ornament. There are no jeweled crowns or golden staffs. Authority is measured in decisiveness, in the ability to keep men alive, in the trust earned through action rather than ceremony. To be followed here, you must prove you can endure what others endure, suffer what they suffer, and still make choices that hold the line firm. The weight of that realization presses on you as heavily as any saddle. You see the men glance toward their leader, not with fear, but with something closer to faith. The commander is both anchor and compass, in a world where horizons never end, and danger can appear from any direction. Without him, the camp is only a collection of families and animals. With him, it becomes a force capable of moving like a storm. And as you trail behind, legs aching, dust clinging to your lips, you understand why survival in a Mongol camp isn't simply about enduring the cold or the hunger. It's about submitting to a structure where one figure bears the burden of decision, and everyone else falls into line because hesitation could mean disaster. The sun glints off the commander's bow as he raises his hand again, setting the next course. The column shifts, dust rising like smoke behind you. And just like that, the vision of leadership fades back into distance, leaving you with the far more immediate challenge of keeping your horse from wandering out of formation. But even as your thighs scream and your balance falters, you carry the image with you, a glimpse of command, sharp and steady against the horizon. A reminder that, while you may not survive a day in this camp, those who do survive it are the ones who give the Mongols their unstoppable edge. And as the column pushes onward, the thought lingers. If this is what ordinary days look like, what would it mean to face an enemy with this force behind it? The answer begins to form in the distance, where the horizon blurs into the possibility of battle. As the column halts and the carts creak into a loose circle, you notice something different about this pause. No one rushes to unpack yurts or start fires. Instead, riders dismount with a solemn quiet, leading their horses to graze while they gather in a wide open space. It's not fatigue that stills them, it's belief. You're about to witness how the Mongols tie their restless, nomadic lives to the unseen forces they carry with them across the endless grass. At first you expect a shrine, some carved totem, maybe a stone altar. But the steppe itself is the sacred space. There are no walls here, no temples. The sky overhead, the eternal blue dome, as they call it, is God enough. The ground beneath your boots is the altar. A few men raise their hands toward the heavens, muttering prayers to eternal sky. The great force they believe governs their victories and their lives. To your untrained ears, the words dissolve into the wind, but the cadence feels both reverent and practical, less lofty than the prayers you've perhaps imagined. Offerings appear, not jewels, not golden bowls, but small, ordinary tokens. A splash of milk poured onto the earth, the corner of a ration left aside, a whisper of smoke sent skyward. You realize that in a world where nothing can be wasted, even these tiny sacrifices are profound. To pour away food in this life of scarcity means acknowledging that there are powers greater than your hunger. Shamans sometimes step forward, draped in skins and bones, their presence less theatrical than grounding. They rattle charms, burn herbs, murmur chants that weave between the crackle of the fire and the hiss of wind. The smoke rises and twists into the night, curling toward stars that watch without blinking. You shift awkwardly, unsure if you should bow, imitate, or simply stand very still. It seems safer. Belief here isn't separate from survival, is woven through every task. The bow you strung this morning isn't just a weapon, it's a gift of wood and sinew granted by the world's spirit. The horse you ride is not just an animal, but a creature with a soul, deserving of respect and ritual. Even the wind that chills your face is not random, it is a breath from the eternal sky, and it can favor you or break you. To live without acknowledging it would be unthinkable. You realize, too, that faith is not only upward, toward the sky, but backward, toward ancestors. Around the fire, stories are told not merely for entertainment, but as remembrance. It's a way of keeping the dead alive in the living. When a rider mentions his grandfather, there's a sense that the old man is still here, riding just beyond the edge of sight. The line between past and present blurs on the steppe. Belief is not a separate act, but an atmosphere, always there, like the wind. You, of course, feel like an outsider. The words escape you, the meaning slip past. Yet even without understanding, you sense the weight of this shared conviction. It binds the camp together as tightly as discipline does, perhaps more so. You may have failed at chores, bungled the riding, even nearly strangled yourself with your bowstring, but belief is not something you can be clumsy at. It surrounds you whether you're skilled or not. As the prayers fade and the camp resumes its bustle, you realize that faith on the steppe isn't a separate event. It's the steady heartbeat beneath everything else: the riding, the fighting, the endless movement. The camp may vanish from the grass with startling efficiency, but this belief follows wherever they go. And as you climb back into your saddle, you wonder what happens when this belief collides with another army's gods, another empire's temples, another people's certainty. That thought hangs with you as the horizon once again swallows the path ahead. Because belief isn't only about comfort, it's also fuel for conquest, as you'll soon glimpse in the shadow of battle. By now, you may have entertained a little fantasy. Perhaps you thought, well, I've made it this far. I've survived the fleas, the fermented milk, the blistered hands, and the guard duty with no guardrails. Maybe I could have been a Mongol warrior after all. It's a pleasant thought. And you should enjoy it while it lasts, because the truth is, you wouldn't survive. Not a week, not even a day, in the true grind of life on the steppe. Let's be honest together for a moment. I'll gently walk you through why you'd be the first one voted off this endless horse-powered island. Start with the climate. You've already shivered at night, complaining that your felt blanket was thin and that the wind whistled too much. But out here, the cold isn't a nuisance, it's a predator. Winter temperatures on the steppe can plummet to levels where your eyelashes freeze mid-blink, and the inside of your nose feels like it's being stabbed with tiny shards of ice. Meanwhile, in summer, the same grasslands roast you alive, no shade for miles, your skin burning while flies find every exposed inch. A Mongol warrior shrugs at both extremes. You would probably cry into your sleeve by midday. Then there's the food, or rather, the lack of variety. You've already sampled the fermented mare's milk, the fatty cuts of horse or mutton, and the occasional scraps of cheese that taste faintly of leather. Congratulations, that was the good part, 'cause often, meals are a little more than boiled meat and broth, day after day after day. There are no spice racks, no bakeries, no late-night snacks. The first time you ask if there's a vegetable somewhere, anything green, you'll be met with polite confusion, followed by laughter. And no, for the record, grass is not on the menu. The riding alone would finish you. Think back to your sore thighs after one afternoon of trotting. Now imagine 12 hours in the saddle every day for weeks. Your legs would stiffen into permanent curves. Your spine would complain loudly enough to demand workers' compensation, and your rear end would develop a relationship with pain that no cushion could heal. Mongol warriors were said to fall asleep on horseback, balancing in rhythm with the gallop. You, on the other hand, would fall asleep once and wake up face first in the mud. And then there's the pace of life. The Mongols never stopped. They could dismantle an entire camp, load it on carts, and be riding again before you even finished rolling your bedding. Their mobility was their strength. Fumbling with your belongings would still be searching for your other boot. As the dust cloud of the departing horde disappeared on the horizon, you wouldn't die dramatically in battle. You'd die because you got left behind, still tugging at the flap of your stubborn tent. Speaking of battle, that's another area where your odds of survival plummet to near zero. The Mongols trained since childhood to loose arrows at full gallop, hitting targets with unnerving accuracy. You've barely managed to string a bow without snapping yourself in the face. Picture this. A hail of arrows darkens the sky, and you raise your bow. Hands trembling, string tangled, only to realize the enemy is already upon you. The only thing you'd hit is your own foot. Let's not forget hygiene or the lack thereof. You already wrinkled your nose at the smoky yurts and the Oda horse sweat. Now stretch that into months of minimal bathing, clothes stiff with dust, and hair perfumed with whatever happened to spill on you last. Your modern standards would crumble faster than a stale biscuit. Mongols, they endured. You'd start composing desperate letters to the future about the invention of showers. And yet, the final reason you wouldn't survive isn't physical, it's mental. The Mongols lived in a world of constant uncertainty, where death was never more than a storm away, or an enemy ambush away, or a horse's broken leg away. They didn't just survive it. They thrived, building the largest land empire in history. You, accustomed to schedules, comfort, and maybe even a mattress, would spend every night calculating how soon you could quit. But there was no quitting. So, no, you wouldn't survive. And that's okay. You weren't meant to. Your role is to watch from the safety of imagination, to sip your tea in bed while picturing this harsh life from afar. You get the story without the frostbite, the culture without the saddle sores. Perhaps that's the best deal of all. Because as the Mongols break camp again, disappearing into the vast horizon, you're left behind in comfort, able to reflect on just how close survival and collapse can sit together. And with that thought, you were nearly ready for the end of our journey, a quiet epilogue that looks back at what all this dust, sweat, and belief truly meant. And so, you reach the end of your long ride across the steppe. You've stumbled through drafty nights, fermented breakfasts, blistered hands, and the endless rattle of hooves. You've crouched by smoky fires, nodded through councils, and pretended to understand prayers whispered into the wind. Along the way, you discovered that while survival here is technically possible, thriving is something else entirely. It takes a life born to the saddle, lungs shaped by the cold, and a stomach that never questions what goes into it. You, meanwhile, get to climb out of this world without frostbitten fingers or a horse that resents you. Instead, you lie in your own bed, one that doesn't collapse in the wind or smell faintly of sheep wool. The eternal sky of the Mongols fades back into your ceiling. The fire's smoke dissolves into the soft hum of whatever keeps you company tonight. The Mongols carried belief, discipline, and an unyielding rhythm that allowed them to stretch an empire across continents. You carry, for now, a story, one that drifted you gently towards sleep while sparing you the saddle sores. That's the bargain of history told this way. You take the journey without the consequences, the dust without the thirst, the victories without the scars. So close your eyes. Let the last echoes of hooves fade to silence. The camp is gone, the horizon empty, and the grass sways quietly in the dark. Another day, another empire, another strange corner of history will wait for you next time. For now, you can rest, knowing you've survived something impossible only in imagination. Sleep well. The steppe will keep riding on without you.